Clients don't buy concrete from a girl. My father whispered those exact words to me right as he snatched the $50 million contract out of my hand. He didn't care that I was the one who spent 2 years negotiating the deal to save our family business from bankruptcy. He just turned to the investors and announced that my brother, Robert, who was currently sweating out a hangover, would be the new CEO. Robert took the pen, signed his name on the work I did, and grinned like he had actually earned it. The room went silent. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I stared at my father for exactly 3 seconds, nodded once, and walked out of the room. He thought I was walking away in defeat. He didn't know I was walking straight to my office to activate the kill switch. Before I tell you exactly how I turned their signature into a death warrant, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't go to the restroom to cry. I didn't call my best friend to vent. I walked straight down the hallway to my office, closed the door, and sat in the ergonomic chair I had bought with my own money because my father said the company budget was too tight for office furniture. He thought he had just put me in my place. He thought I was going to pack a cardboard box with my stapler and a few picture frames and disappear into the night, another casualty of his ego. But he forgot who I actually was. My name is Aurora. I am 29 years old. And for the last 5 years, I have been the invisible engine keeping this company alive. My title was Operations Manager. But my reality was Shadow CEO. I negotiated the contracts. I managed the 90-person crew. I smoothed over the regulatory nightmares my father created and cleaned up the financial messes my brother left behind. And for that privilege I was paid $82,000 a year. In the construction industry in Seattle, for the level of work I was doing, that is less than half the market rate. I knew it. My father knew it. But every time I asked for a raise, he would give me the same tired speech about sacrifice and building a legacy. He told me we were all tightening our belts. But Robert wasn't tightening anything. My brother is 26. He failed out of business school twice. His primary contribution to the company was taking clients to strip clubs and billing it as consulting. And yet, I knew for a fact that his starting salary as of this morning was $250,000 a year, plus an unlimited expense account, plus a company vehicle that cost more than my entire college education. I knew this because I processed the payroll. I saw the numbers every 2 weeks. I swallowed the bile and told myself it was temporary, that my father would eventually see who was actually doing the work. But the real knife in the gut wasn't the salary. It was what happened last month. I had applied for a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the city, closer to the office so I could work the 80-hour weeks my father demanded. I got rejected. The leasing agent told me my debt-to-income ratio was too high. I still had $60,000 in student loans. Loans my father had promised to pay off as part of my hiring bonus 5 years ago. He never paid a dime. He kept saying, "Next quarter. Honey, cash flow is tricky." 2 days after my rejection letter arrived, I saw a wire transfer leave our operating account. $400,000. It was a cash purchase for a luxury condo downtown. The deed was in Robert's name. My father bought my incompetent brother a penthouse with company funds, while I was getting rejected for a rental because of debts he promised to cover. That was the moment the illusion broke. It wasn't about cash flow. It wasn't about legacy. It was about a hierarchy I could never climb because I was born the wrong gender. I sat at my desk and looked at the dual monitors glowing in front of me. To my father, this was just a workstation for his assistant. To me, it was the cockpit of the entire empire. I had access to everything. The bank accounts, the project management software, the vendor contracts, and the licensing board portals. He hadn't fired me. He hadn't revoked my access. He expected me to stay and clean up the mess Robert was about to make. I placed my hand on the mouse. I wasn't going to clean it up. I was going to burn it down. There was a photograph sitting on the corner of my desk, tucked behind my dual monitors where clients couldn't see it. It was taken 19 years ago. I was 10, wearing a plastic hard hat that was 3 sizes too big, standing next to my father on a job site. He had his hand on my shoulder, pointing at a set of blueprints spread out on a sawhorse. For years, I looked at that picture and saw love. I saw a father teaching his daughter the family trade. I saw a legacy being passed down. But sitting there today, with the hum of the server room vibrating through the floorboards, I finally saw the truth. I remembered that day vividly. It wasn't a bring your daughter to work day. It was a crisis management day. Robert, who was 7 at the time, had thrown a tantrum and lost a critical set of permits in the mud. My father had brought me in not to learn, but to organize. He had handed me the blueprints and said, "Aurora, look at these lines. You see where the load-bearing wall is?" "Yes, Daddy," I'd said, swelling with pride. "Good," he'd replied, his voice serious. "You need to learn this. You need to learn every inch of this business. Because Robert has the vision. He has the spark. But he misses the details. You need to be his eyes, Aurora. You need to learn this so you can catch him when he falls. He wasn't training a CEO. He was training a safety net. He spent 20 years sharpening my mind, honing my skills, and hardening my resolve. Not so I could lead, but so I could serve as the eternal understudy to a brother who never bothered to learn the lines. I was the insurance policy against Robert's incompetence. I picked up the frame. The glass was cool against my palm. I didn't smash it. That would be messy. I simply opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one where I kept the dead batteries and old staples, and dropped it inside. The thud was final. I turned back to my screen. It was time to resign. But a resignation letter is just paper. In the construction industry, power isn't about titles. It's about licenses. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to the state contractors licensing board portal. I didn't need to hack anything. I didn't need to guess a password. It was my login. You see, my father owns the company, but he doesn't hold the license. He lost his eligibility 10 years ago after a DUI. Robert never passed the exams. For the last 5 years, the entire legal existence of this multi-million-dollar company has rested on one thing. My name listed as the qualifying individual on the surety bond. Without me, they aren't a construction company. They are just two guys with a lot of expensive trucks they aren't legally allowed to drive. I clicked on the Manage License tab. The screen displayed our status as active and in good standing. I moved the cursor to the button that said, Disassociate Qualified Individual. My finger hovered over the mouse. If I clicked this now, the notification would go out immediately. They would get an email. The bond would be suspended within 48 hours. It would cause chaos, sure, but it would give them time to scramble. Maybe find a shady workaround, or pay off a consultant to rent a license. No. I needed this to hurt. I checked the digital calendar. The refinancing closing, the bank meeting that was supposed to secure the capital for Robert's new vision, was scheduled for exactly 2 weeks from today. I clicked the drop-down menu for effective date. I scrolled past today's date. I selected the morning of the bank closing. I hit submit. The screen refreshed. Pending revocation. It was done. I hadn't just quit. I had set a timer on a bomb that was buried deep in the foundation of their empire. And the best part? They wouldn't hear it ticking until the building was already coming down on top of them. I walked out of the building with nothing but my coat and my car keys. I didn't take a box of personal effects. I didn't say goodbye to the receptionist. I left my access badge on the desk, right next to the empty picture frame. For the next 2 weeks, my phone didn't stop vibrating. 17 calls from my father. 12 from Robert. A flurry of texts ranging from asking where the hell I was, to demanding I stop being dramatic and get back to work. I didn't block them. I just silenced them. I wanted to see the desperation ramp up. I spent those 2 weeks sitting on my sofa in my studio apartment, drinking tea and watching the end of the world on a 10-inch screen. You see, when I left, I forgot to return the company iPad I used for remote site management. It was listed on the asset sheet. But I knew Robert. He was too lazy to do an inventory audit. He was too busy measuring the curtains for his new corner office to worry about IT security. So, I had a front row seat to the collapse. On Tuesday morning, I watched the project management portal update in real time. It was the deadline for the Skyline bid submission. I sat there, heart thumping a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs, watching Robert's user profile log in. He uploaded the proposal documents I had prepared weeks ago. He attached the budget sheets. He attached the architectural renderings. Then, a red notification banner flashed across the screen, alerting him that the mandatory EPA environmental impact report was missing. I held my breath. I hadn't deleted the report. I simply hadn't filed it yet. It was a complex, 200-page document that required a wet signature from a certified officer. It was sitting in a folder on my desktop titled Pending. Robert paused. I could almost see him in the office, rolling his eyes, annoyed that the software was slowing him down. He didn't call the environmental consultant. He didn't check my files. He moved his cursor to the override button to file as pending or request a waiver. He clicked it. Submission complete. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He had just submitted a bid for a federal project with a waiver request for a mandatory environmental law. The moment the bank auditor saw that, the project wouldn't just be rejected. The company would be flagged for compliance review. He had just walked blindfolded into a minefield. But I wasn't done. I needed more than incompetence. I needed a crime. I switched apps to the banking portal. I had read-only access to the construction draw accounts. These are specific loans granted by the bank solely for buying materials like steel, concrete, and glass. Misusing these funds isn't just embezzlement. It's federal lending fraud. I scrolled through the ledger for the last month. There it was. A wire transfer for $50,000. The recipient wasn't a steel supplier. It wasn't a concrete vendor. It was an entity called Blue Chip Consulting Services, based in Las Vegas, Nevada. I knew that name. I had seen it on Robert's personal credit card statements years ago when I was cleaning up his messes. It wasn't a consulting firm. It was a shell company for a high-end casino host who collected gambling debts. 2 days later, another transfer. $20,000 to Prestige Imports. My father had bought Robert a company car using money borrowed to build a hospital. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt cold. I felt precise. I downloaded the statements. I highlighted the transfers. I compiled a forensic ledger that drew a straight, undeniable line between the bank's loan money and Robert's vices. I hit print. The printer on my kitchen counter hummed to life. The pages slid out, warm and crisp. This wasn't just leverage. This was a felony. I stacked the papers into a neat pile. The trap was set. The evidence was secured. Now, I just had to wait for them to walk into the room where they thought they were going to be saved. 30 days. That's exactly how long it took for the silence to break. For the first 4 weeks, I watched from a distance, as my former life unraveled. I saw the Skyline project status change from pending to stalled. The notification I had been waiting for finally appeared on the project dashboard, showing funding suspended due to regulatory non-compliance. The bank had frozen their main line of credit. Without that EPA report, the federal loan guarantees were worthless. My father couldn't buy steel. He couldn't pay the unions. He was bleeding cash at a rate of $50,000 a day. I expected a call begging for help. I expected Robert to show up at my door, panicked and sweaty, asking where the file was. But that didn't happen. Instead, on a Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my father. I sat on my balcony, watching the Seattle rain streak against the glass, and pressed play. His voice wasn't desperate. It was triumphant. It was the voice of a man who had gambled the house and thought he'd just drawn a royal flush. "Aurora," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm just calling to let you know we don't need you. You thought that little paperwork glitch would stop us? You thought you were indispensable?" He let out a sharp, arrogant laugh. "I fixed it. I found a new lender. A private equity group that actually understands vision. We're refinancing the whole debt package tomorrow morning. Robert is signing the deal at 9. You're nothing, sweetheart. You're yesterday's news." I lowered the phone. He hadn't fixed anything. He had found a hard money lender. I knew exactly the type. These weren't traditional banks that cared about EPA compliance or long-term viability. These were predatory sharks who looked at asset values, the equipment, the land, the receivables, and offered quick cash at exorbitant interest rates. They didn't care if the project failed. In fact, they usually made more money if it did, because they could seize the collateral immediately. My father was so desperate to prove he didn't need me that he had just leveraged the entire company, and likely his personal assets, to a loan shark in a suit. He thought he'd found a lifeline. He didn't realize he'd just tightened the rope around his own future. I sipped my tea, unlocked my phone, and didn't call him back. I opened my calendar. Tomorrow, Friday the 15th, 9 a.m. One entry, no meeting, no reminder, just an automated task I scheduled the day I walked out. Event. Surety bond revocation, effective immediately. My father was walking into a closing room to sign a deal that depended on the company being licensed and bonded. The moment he picked up the pen, the state board would receive my formal withdrawal as the qualifying individual. The bond would disappear. The license would suspend. He wasn't going to a signing. He was walking into an ambush he'd built with his own arrogance. I closed the app and slept soundly for the first time in a month. The bank conference room was quiet, except for Robert's pen scratching as he practiced his signature. He looked the part. 3-piece suit, hair slicked back, the posture of a young tycoon, ready to close the deal of the century. My father lounged in a leather chair beside him, wearing the smug calm of a man convinced he'd outsmarted reality. Across the table sat the hard money lender's pinstripes and predator smiles. Sharks waiting for ink. On 9:50 a.m., "Gentlemen," the notary said, reaching for his stamp. "Shall we begin?" My father adjusted his tie. "Let's get this done. We have a company to expand." Robert reached for the loan documents. Then the heavy oak door swung open. It wasn't the bank manager with congratulations. It was Mr. Henderson, the bank's chief risk officer. No champagne, no handshake. Just a single, thin strip of thermal fax paper in his hand. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, face unreadable. "Stop," Henderson said quietly, but with enough weight to freeze Robert's hand mid-air. My father's smile twitched. "Is there a problem?" "We're on a schedule." "The deal is dead, Dylan," Henderson replied. "We cannot fund this loan." My father stood up fast, face flushing. "That's ridiculous. We have a term sheet. We have collateral. You can't back out now." "We didn't back out," Henderson said. You defaulted. He slid the facts across the table. At 9 o'clock this morning, we received a notice from the state licensing board. Your surety bond has been revoked. My father stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. Revoked? Impossible. We paid the premium. It wasn't revoked for non-payment, Henderson corrected. It was revoked because the qualifying individual dissociated from your license. Robert blinked. Qualifying individual? Who's that? Henderson didn't even pause. It's Aurora. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crushing, like the room itself was squeezing the arrogance out of them. My father had always believed ownership meant power. Name on the door. Chair at the table. Loud voice. Signed checks. He forgot what actually mattered in this industry. Permission to exist. I didn't own the equity. But I owned the credential that kept their operation legal. And when I walked away, I took the gravity with me. My father's voice cracked. She can't do that. She's just an employee. She was the license holder, Henderson said. Without a valid bond, you are legally prohibited from entering contracts over $500. You're now in breach of every active contract you have. You are insolvent. End quote. When if you won. They're now insolvent. The private equity lenders stood immediately. No speeches. No threats. Just briefcases, snapping shut, and quiet footsteps out the door. Robert jumped up. Wait. We can fix this. We'll get another bond. We'll hire someone. Henderson didn't move. He placed a second stack of documents on the table, printouts, not faxes. Even if you could replace the bond, he said, colder now. We have a bigger issue. We received an affidavit this morning regarding misuse of federal loan funds. He tapped a highlighted line. $50,000 to a casino consultant in Vegas. $20,000 for a personal vehicle. My father froze. He looked at the paper, then at Robert. This is lending fraud, Henderson said. A federal matter. The bank is required to file a suspicious activity report immediately. That was the moment loyalty should have appeared, the father and son standing together when the price arrived. Robert didn't hesitate. He told me to do it. Robert shouted, pointing at my father, his composure collapsing. It was his idea. He said it was a business expense. He said we'd pay it back before anyone noticed. My father recoiled like he'd been struck. Robert, what are you saying? I'm not going to jail for you. Robert barked, sweat shining at his temples. He approved the transfers. It's his company. That's where it broke legacy, dynasty, father-son loyalty. Not a dramatic snap. A quiet dissolve the instant consequences showed up. Henderson gathered his files. I'm freezing all operating accounts effective immediately. Security will escort you out. My father sank into his chair, staring at the empty seat at the end of the table, the seat where I used to sit and quietly keep the whole machine alive. But it was empty, and the gravity was gone. The collapse wasn't a slow bleed. It was a guillotine. Once the surety bond vanished, the bank didn't just kill the new loan, they triggered the cross-default on every existing debt. By late morning, they issued a notice of acceleration. Equipment loans, headquarters mortgage, personal estate line. All due immediately. By noon, operating accounts were frozen, payroll bounced, fuel cards died, vendors stopped shipping, and Empire became a carcass before lunch. At 4 p.m., my phone rang. Dylan. I answered and said nothing. I listened to a man discovering he wasn't untouchable, sobbing, not shouting. Aurora, he choked. Please, fix this. Call the bonding company. Reinstate the license. They're taking the house. They're taking everything. We're family. Family, his favorite word when he needed protection. Never when he needed a successor. I can't help you, Dylan, I said evenly. Conflict of interest. What conflict? He stammered. I don't work for your company, I replied, and I need to protect my capital. I registered as a bidder for the liquidation auction next Tuesday. I'm planning to buy your excavators. I hear they're going for cents on the dollar. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. 6 months later, I walked into the corner office again. It didn't smell like cigars and entitlement. It smelled like fresh paint and actual work. I'd bought the assets at the distress sale. I didn't buy the old name too toxic. I launched my own firm. Foundation Construction. I hired back the foremen, project managers, and admin staff they'd laid off. They didn't return for loyalty. They returned because they knew the person in the big chair could actually read a blueprint. Robert is awaiting trial for federal lending fraud. He tried to bargain his way out, but the paper trail was too clean, too thick. Dylan lives in a 2-bedroom rental, a town over Social Security, no status, no story left except the son he bet everything on. I sat at the desk. My desk picked up the plastic nameplate that read D.Y. Land Sterling, CEO, and dropped it into the trash. Then I replaced it with my old, scratched-up hard hat. I didn't inherit an empire. I let the old one burn, so I could build one that actually stands. And if you've ever had to burn it down to build it right, share this story.